This video contains minor story spoilers for the following games: the Stanley Parable, the Beginner's Guide, What Remains of Edith Finch, Gone Home, and Dear Esther. Important plot points are only hinted at, but not revealed. In Doom 2016, the very first thing you do is rip apart the chains of your own coffin before tearing your way through undead beasts and foul demons. In the Stanley Parable, you choose whether to walk through the left door or the right door. In Breath of the Wild, you embark on an epic quest to tame a vast wilderness using only your wits and your skills, the fate of the world resting in your hand. In Dear Esther, you begin your stroll across a small Hebridean island. In Wolfenstein: The New Order, you fly a plane towards a secret base, shoot down enemy aircraft, put out fires, jump out of the door to another plane, only to get shot down in the end. In Gone Home, you go through your home. Walking simulators have no gameplay, people cry. All you do is walk. Hence the name. And don't be mistaken, it isn't merely a descriptor, it was coined as an insult. There's been lots of discussions whether the term shouldn't be changed or not to something less reductive. Maybe something along the lines of interactive story. But I honestly don't mind it. It's descriptive the same way Metroidvania and roguelike are. Those don't apply to every game either, but people know what they mean and what they're in for. It's a walking simulator. You walk. Don't expect any fighting or puzzle solving. So the question is, how do you play a game without any gameplay? I can tell you right away, it's not just walking around. That you can do in any game. Walking sims are different. They expect something of the player that not many games do. But before we can talk about that, we need to clarify what walking simulators actually are. The most important distinction is that other games have some sort of actual gameplay which everything else is built around. You collect the things, you shoot the guys, you do the platforming. Walking simulators don't really have that. Some do, but not to the same extent. Instead, they focus on the narrative. They want to tell a story first and foremost. And like stories, they're usually linear. I've yet to play a non-linear one at the very least. Well, with one exception. More on that later. So most of the quote action consists of walking from one part of the narrative to the next, and it lacks any sort of failure state. Hard to lose when all you do is walk. This makes them incredibly accessible to just about anyone. Your 90-year-old grandma can play them as much as your 6-year-old nephew. But all you do is walk, says the straw man. How is that different from forwarding a movie on a remote? You see, this is where the actual quote gameplay comes in. Walking simulators invite you to answer questions. All sorts of questions about the world you're in. Who are you? What does any of this mean? Is what's being said true, or is there more to it? Are there any implications, intrigues, even secrets and mysteries? What is the game actually trying to tell you overall? To answer these questions, you need to make use of two main pillars. The first one is the story interaction. Meaning what the game is telling you via narration, dialogue, and so on, and how characters interact with each other. This is completely inescapable. The player is essentially being spoon-fed the story. The second pillar is world interaction. This is where the story is being told. Everything that's part of it, but not directly connected to the narrative. If the game takes place in a house, then the world is everything inside it. Furniture, paintings, belongings, and so on. These things can be experienced at the player's own pace and can often be only found by exploring, usually when the story takes a backseat. Whether you find these doesn't necessarily matter either. But it's still important as you need both pillars to answer your questions. For instance, mute the Stanley Parable narrator and all you do is walk through an office. Remove the house from Gone Home and all you get is a teen drama. However, not every game makes use of each pillar equally. Rather, they exist on opposite ends of a spectrum and the games themselves fall somewhere in the middle. So on one side, the story side, the player finds the answers they seek in what's being told and less in the world around them. On the other side, it's reversed. There is a narrative, but it takes less precedence over the player figuring everything out themselves by interacting with what's around them. Now let's look at some actual video games to illustrate the spectrum. Our first example is the one I think most people are familiar with, the Stanley Parable. In it, you play as office worker Stanley, either doing what the narrator says or not. The game gives you a lot of choices in the form of which path to walk down, which all lead to different outcomes. You can go free at the end, throw yourself off a ledge, burn a baby, romance a bucket, ascend to heaven, and many, many more. This means that the Stanley Parable is an extreme outlier. There is not one story to tell, but multiple different ones. Sad stories are almost entirely disconnected from one another, and the characterization of the narrator changes constantly. He's either nice or evil, serious or silly, all-knowing or powerless. This puts the game straight on the story side of the spectrum. World interaction is almost entirely non-existent, being restricted to a few side gags or things leading to yet more endings, so you're just along for the ride. Closer towards the center of the graph is the Beginner's Guide, funnily enough made by one of Stanley Parable's creators, Davey Reedon. In it, he showcases and explains several games his friend Coda made over the years. So there is a story for the player to follow, but it omits several important parts. You get walked through each game chronologically, but quickly pick up on the fact that Davey isn't showing you the full picture. Despite claiming to be an expert on the various games, he often doesn't know everything about them, dismisses or glosses over important details, and outright lies to you. By paying attention to your surroundings and what the games are about, the player can come to a different conclusion at the end. Davey says how he interprets them or why he thinks they came to be, but that doesn't mean it's true. Your own views matter. Right in the middle of the spectrum lies What Remains of Edith Finch, the perfect balance of story and world. You play as the titular Edith, exploring her family's abandoned house, trying to discover how a curse took everyone's lives. The story is told in a linear fashion by playing through each family member's last moments in a sort of minigame. Some of these can be completely ignored, but most have to be experienced and in a certain order. The player can, however, explore the house itself and arrive at wildly different conclusions depending on what they find. It's unclear exactly how several family members really died, as the stories are often exaggerated retellings. But by going through their belongings, you can realize that there might be more to the curse. Let's just say that safety isn't a priority for the Finches. So, depending on how much you explore the world, the story changes wildly. Further to the right on the spectrum is Gone Home, a game I talked about in the previous video. Similar to What Remains of Edith Finch, you also explore your family's house to figure out what happened to everyone. However, here the story is tied directly to the interaction with the world. If you don't click on anything, it's just an empty house. But if you interact with certain important items, the narration kicks in. Even still, the story being told doesn't answer all questions. Most of it is his sister talking about falling in love with a girl at school and has nothing to do with the missing family. Much like in Edith, only by exploring the rooms can you see the bigger picture. So you really do need both story and world to understand what the game is about. And this brings me to the last example, Dear Esther, which couldn't be further on the world side of the spectrum if it tried. In this one you play as... well, let's just say you walk across an island. Why? See, that's the thing. You don't know. The narrator isn't any help, since while he starts out describing the island, he quickly devolves into a rambling mess talking about bottomless cars and sea creatures. Instead, it's the island itself which holds the answers. Scattered about are little trinkets, memorials of unknown origin and purpose, and even things that logically shouldn't exist, such as massive murals on cliff walls. All of them telling a greater story. But what story is that? I couldn't tell you. It'd be trying to make sense of nonsense. And I'll be honest, I don't even think the game knows. I don't mean that in a condescending way, rather that there is no one true answer. Much like there's no right or wrong way to look at a painting. So no matter which conclusion you arrive at, which way you interpret what you've heard and seen, it's all equally valid. And the player has many opportunities to ponder this during what I call downtime. Downtime is when the story rests, the narration stops, and the player is left to their own thoughts. When the game tries to reduce the amount of sensations as much as possible to allow you to concentrate. And I think this is why the term walking simulator works so well. What is one of the best ways to unwind, to de-stress your brain, to reduce anxieties and worries? You go on a walk. Almost any game has a story, but it's only walking sims that allow you to fully immerse yourself in it. There's no distractions, it's just you and your thoughts. Depending on where games fall on the graph, downtime is more or less pronounced. Dear Esther has it throughout, What Remains of Edith Finch does it occasionally, and the Stanley Parable really only has it during the recently added epilogue. This is what a lot of people take issue with when it comes to walking simulators, that there is nothing going on. But there is something going on. You need to engage with the material, try to analyze it as it's happening. If all you do is look at it and go, wow, it's just walking, then you're failing at a game without failure states. This is also a big reason for why you watch the credits. They too are downtime, a part of the game itself, letting you digest everything. You've had your meal at the restaurant, now you're waiting for the check. Even though you've already had your fill, the experience only ends once you step outside the door. So to summarize, walking sims leave the player with questions which are answered either directly by the narrative or the world, with every game focusing more or less on one of them. But it's up to you, the player, to actually think about it, to not just let it wash over yourself and go, that's it, at the end. So even if there's no direct gameplay that requires the player to think critically or have quick reflexes, they still need to figure out a sort of puzzle. You don't have to get it all right away, you don't even need to understand anything. You just can't be dismissive of the whole thing. And once I realized that, it made me appreciate walking simulators so much more. So I hope I was able to convey my love and appreciation for this niche genre of video games. If you're interested in any recommendations for walking simulators, the ones I discussed in the video are all amazing. I've even made my very own one in the GZDoom engine, which I'll link below. I'd be honored if you gave that one a go and let me know where you think it fits on the spectrum. Please also let me know if you've played any walking sims not mentioned here and where you'd place them on the graph. And if you want to support me, then you can do that by leaving a like, a comment, by subscribing, or even by donating directly to my Patreon. Anything is appreciated. But for now, I'd like to thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day and goodbye.